completely. Maybe West Virginia football has kind of forgotten how to win games. Just kind of like we forgot to do a show the last 2 weeks. No, I'm just kidding. We did not forget to do shows. I was obviously out for my wedding and honeymoon. I'm back now. Glad to be back in the saddle. And obviously, a lot's happened since we were last recording. And we've got a lot to talk about here on the Between the Ears show. And today, I had to bring in the guy that I've had so many conversations with about this particular topic, and that is about Neal Brown. My guy, Eugene Napoleon, former West Virginia running back, the co-host of the Walkthrough Game Day Show, and the host of Relatively Sports here on Mountaineers Now. Be sure to click that subscribe button on YouTube, Mountaineers Now. You can follow us on Mountaineers Now as well. And Gene, let's just get right into the meat of it all. 31-14. West Virginia scored a late, garbage time touchdown to make it a little bit more respectable, I guess, against Iowa State this past weekend. 2 weeks ago, the loss to TCU. I don't think anyone can really say anything bad about that game. I mean, obviously there's some things that went wrong in that game for them to lose it, but there's no shame in losing to TCU. But to follow that up with the performance that they had on the road at Iowa State was just, to me, it had to be where you draw the line. And here we are sitting today, Wednesday. We are 3 or 4 days, however you want to count it, from West Virginia taking on Oklahoma, and Neal Brown is still the head coach of the West Virginia Mountaineers. What does that make you feel as a former player and now a fan of the team?
Well, there's a few things. One, as a former player, I have to admit, I'm bothered by the product of what we're putting on the field. And again, this is not the student athletes. This is not the players. I'm a big organizational guy. I'm a big coaches guy. Like, when those players are out there playing and they're straining to win football games, you're only as good as the staff that's preparing you to play. It's as simple as that. So from a player's perspective, am I disappointed? Yeah, I'm disappointed because I've played in that program for some great coaches and a great head coach. Win, lose, or draw, we were prepared to play. Period. There was no excuses as to whether or not we were prepared to play. You heard it from former players, especially that I interview on Relatively Sports. If you hear anything, the consistent thread is the bond and the brotherhood, and you play for one another, and you play for that staff, and you play for the great state and university, all of that good stuff. I'm not sure if our players are always prepared to play, because a lot of times they don't look like they're prepared to play. So I have to put that on the staff. This is what we hired you for. So the most disappointing thing to me is when I look at the rankings, and I'm not used to seeing West Virginia dead last. I'm not used to seeing that, Schuyler. Yeah, that bothers me. But I also know the other side of this. I'm a businessman, so I also understand the other side of this too. People may ask, and I'm reading comments like everybody else. Why is coach still a coach? Well, it's a simple matter of mathematics. It's a simple matter of time. If said person and staff is fired now, you got to pay more.
Right.
If you get rid of them latter part or when the season's over, the buyout is less. So it's a simple matter of economics. Now, fans may not like that, but there's a business component to this thing as well. There is a business component to this thing. I'm reading the comments right after the loss to Iowa State, and it was atrocious to read some of those comments. Here's where I back up a little bit. Let's be human about this. Let's be human beings about this. No one takes a job gets scrutinized more than collegiate, coaches, right? And you may say, well, that's what you put yourself in the game for. You're making all this money. If you lose, you're supposed to get scrutinized. This is true. Every university does it different. I just noticed that South Florida got rid of their coach after 3 years.
Yeah.
And I see the comparable records, right? And if you take a year off, because now Coach Brown is in his 4th year, but if you take a year off of where Coach Brown is, the records are eerily similar. And they got rid of their coach in 3. They do business a little bit differently than what we do at WVU. Simple as that. Most universities do. You can't name a coach that West Virginia has fired in the middle of the season or towards the end of the season. You can't, because that's not the way West Virginia does its business. Like or unlike by the fans, that's not the way West Virginia does its business. There's not a surprise that Coach Brown is still the head coach after WVU winds up being the worst team in the Big 12 conference. Statistically, we pretty much, there's a travesty in pretty much all of the statistical categories as to where we are now. And when you look at that, the mantra of trust to climb kind of pales in comparison. I saw this thing, and I'm gonna turn it back to you, which was really sad. This caricature of a guy falling off the ledge. I don't know if you've seen it. Yeah. Okay. That's pretty much, I don't think you can get any worse than that as far as where the fans and how they're feeling. And to a certain extent, Schuyler, I got to say, I understand that. I get it. As a former player, I get it. It hurts. I can't sit here and lie to you. It bothers me to think that we are the worst team in our conference. I'm just not used to that.
Yeah, and the fans aren't either. I think a lot of the people that write about this team also are not used to or accustomed to seeing this. And I think, again, when you look, as we have pointed out several times on all of our shows, when you look around just the Big 12, you look at Lance Leipold, turned that thing in year 2. Chris Kleiman was hired the same year as Neal Brown and has steadily improved every single year. They're in the Big 12 picture again this year. You look at Dave Aranda in Baylor. He won the Big 12 championship in year 2. Like, there is other examples within the conference that show it doesn't take 4 or 5 years to rebuild a program like it once did 10, 15 years ago. Times have changed. But I do know why Neal Brown is not, or why Neal Brown is still the head coach of West Virginia. And you had just pointed it out a few minutes ago. It's about money, right? Like, at some point, when a player, whether it be in the professional ranks or in the college ranks, when a player is not living up to his expectations, right, that they're set upon from the head coach, front office, whatever. When a player doesn't live up to expectations, what happens? He gets benched, right? He either gets benched, loses playing time, loses his role, maybe even gets cut, or maybe even loses a scholarship. That's what happens to a player. When a coach does it, it's a little different, especially at this level, at the college level. At the college level, if a player doesn't live up to his expectations, it's simple. You just bench him, or he loses his role. For a coach, you have to pay that man. You have to pay him a lot of money. For Neal Brown in particular, and this is according to the info that I have, if West Virginia were to fire him right now, his buyout would be $20.2 million.
Right.
Should they wait till, I believe it's January 1st, 2023, it would drop to 16.7. Now, again, that's not a lot of money. That's only, $3-4 million bucks. But that's a lot. That's a big difference. The only thing is, I don't think if Neal Brown is going to make it through the end of this season and he gets through the month of December as the head coach, he's not getting fired after January 1st before next season. He's going to be the head coach at West Virginia next season if he's still here in late December. I guarantee you. Why would
Right.
they wait? Why would they go ahead and make that move where you're only going to save $3 or $4 million? You're going to get into, you're going to throw your hat into the coaching carousel way late. You're going to have a mass exodus of transfers. You're not going to have time to recruit the guys that are committed to this current recruiting class. It would be an absolute mess. Not saying it can't happen, but I don't believe that's what will transpire. So it's either going to happen immediately after the season, or
Right.
he's going to come back for a fifth year. If he comes back for a fifth year, that buyout again can drop down to 12.7 million. So
Right.
it's going to steadily decrease. But here's the thing that I've been told. For Neal Brown to be fired, Shane Lyons and this administration, they will need to be embarrassed. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means going 3-9. I don't know if that means going 3-9 and getting blown out by 30 in each of those games, or I don't know what that means. I really don't. For them to be embarrassed, I think it's got to be pretty close to, I mean, just to think that we're having these conversations, right? That just tells me that there's already been some sort of conversations behind closed doors about this current situation with the program. The other thing I will say, the most teams in this situation, year 4, things aren't going your way. Things have never really trended upward. You're 3-6, may not win another game this season. If you look at other situations like this around the country, what do you see, Gene? Especially today, what do you see happening?
Gone.
Kids are transferring out.
As a matter of fact, that coach is usually gone, and then kids are leaving. Or in this case, if that we're hearing, we have to be embarrassed. What's more embarrassing than finishing up the last in your conference?
Dead last, exactly.
Now, if the anticipation is do it again for a 5th year, then you understand what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, the recruiting classes coming in is one of the best recruiting classes, I guess, that on paper at least, because you know me, I'm not big on that kind of stuff because it's about developing what you have right now. And I think that's another big reason why we're struggling. Some of the recruits you brought in, they're not being developed, apparently. So, you know, and if a kid is coming to WVU now and they're looking at what's going on now, maybe they are looking at it through the right lens. Well, I want to come and help the situation. I think I can help, you know what I mean, as a DB, as a receiver, as a running back, as an offensive line, defensive lineman, you know what I mean? I think I can help. If that's the case, I'm all for that. I'm all for that. Then you're coming for the right reasons. If Neal Brown is let go right after the season and you have a mad exodus in our recruits, then you've blown an opportunity when you probably should have made that move earlier, because you had a chance to whoever you bring in to now put them on the recruiting trails to either keep the kids that you have, because you're going to assure them that even though I didn't take the ingredients, because you know what happens when a coach leaves, other player, hey, he didn't recruit me. He may not even know about me. So why am I going to stay? I'm out. This is why you have to do things a little earlier to make sure that you don't lose what you already have. And if you do lose, the kids that you're recruiting wherever you're coming from, you now bring them to WVU if you can. It's a balance to this thing, Schuyler. And right now, I don't think we're winning that balance war.
No. But like I said, I think the one thing that is kind of telling, now, again, maybe I'm just looking too far into this. Again, in this situation where you're 3-6 in year 4, things aren't heading in your direction. Normally, there would already be a bunch of guys transferring out of the program. We've had a number of we've seen a number of transfers out of this program since Neal Brown's taken over. But again, that's also when the transfer portal really started to become an actual thing.
Right.
And those first couple of years where guys were transferring out midseason, maybe they didn't fit Neal Brown's, style, whatever.
Right.
But to see that there has not been that crazy, bolt to the transfer portal yet tells me something. Like maybe this is just a thing of the defense has been beaten up all year long. They don't have the injuries, or they've had a ton of injuries. They
Right.
weren't able to really replace those guys that they lost in the portal in time. And a lot of these guys are coming back next year. They have eligibility. So maybe it's just I'm not trying to vouch for Neal Brown to get another year. I'm not trying to do that. I'm not trying to vouch and say that he needs to be gone now. I'm just laying the facts out there that this is kind of a little abnormal for this situation to be happening. So not only that, but like I think if you just look around college football right now, like there's other situations where this is happening and teams are making moves, but those teams, or those schools, I should say, have a ton of money. Auburn has a ton of money. They don't have, West Virginia doesn't have Auburn money. I'm sorry. They don't.
Right.
And for you to move off of a coach, you're going to have to not only pay him, but you're probably going to have to pay the assistants already on the staff. And you're going to have to bring in a whole new coaching staff, a whole new support staff. There's a lot of moving parts behind the scenes that I think a lot of people don't realize. Like
they don't.
When a new coach comes in, he may want his own strength coach. He may want his own academic advisor. Like you're going to have all these things that you don't even think about as a fan.
If you do the math, those coaches have to be paid. The assistants, if you fire them, they got to be paid.
Yeah.
So, including Coach Brown. But if you do the math and you look at some of these high-end coaches that are signing these astronomical contracts, 10 years, $100 million, and 8 years, $70 million, West Virginia will never be in a position, nor should they. I'm sorry. We're not talking about brain surgery here. I'm not giving somebody $100 million. I'm sorry. That's just me. I'm old school. I'm sorry. But my point is, there's coaches out there that are great coaches, that it's the right man for the right job. And West Virginia is by far that type of university where you have to bring in the right man for this particular job. At the end of the day, if you add up Coach Brown's payout along with the staff, it's not going to equal what you're going to have to pay a coach to come in here. That's my point, right? And I'm not talking the high end $80 million and $70 million and $100 million. When I see these contracts, 10 years, $100 million, I'm like, gee whiz.
Jimbo contracts.
Right. I'm like, that's incredible to me. But my point is, there is a medium. There's a happy medium with coaches that I believe, if Coach Brown is to be released, that would fit WVU in a way that I think we can be competitive. Let me say this about Neal Brown. Let me be clear. Patience is a virtue, right? Potential gets you fired. When somebody says, oh, potentially this person could be this or that person could be that, and then that potential doesn't happen in a certain time period, usually you're fired.
Yeah.
Okay. We have to look at what is that time period for the administration with Neal Brown.
It's different than the fan bases.
Right. And nobody knows that but the administration. You understand what I'm saying? So that's why I'm not even in that bag anymore about he needs to be gone, because we're not in those closed door meetings. Whatever that time period is, it's going to be. I'm a West Virginia fan through and through, a former graduate and Mountaineer player. So I'm going to ride hard for WVU, regardless of who they play. I'm going to always cast my vote for the Mountaineers, even though we have a situation with Coach Brown, whether or not he's the head coach. He's the head coach now. Whether or not he needs to be the head coach in the future, has nothing to do with this conversation anymore. You know why? Because we're not behind those closed doors making those decisions.
Exactly. And I think if you go and scroll on Twitter right now and you
Oh,
search Neal Brown's name, there's a lot of just craziness out there, whether it's the fans, saying what they want to say or all these false rumors that are out there. I will say this. I want to clear some stuff up. And usually I don't do this, but I'm going to clear some stuff up because there's just so much out there that
misinformation.
misinformation out there that the fans are starting to read into and start to believe and all this stuff. There's a report floating out there. I don't remember who it was from. I quoted the guy's tweet and said that was not true. So if you go on my Twitter at Callihan_, I'm sure you can find it, that West Virginia was going to fire Neal Brown, that they were expected to move on from Neal Brown on Monday.
I saw that somewhere. Yeah.
It's Wednesday night. Neal Brown is still the head coach of West Virginia. And I said that on Monday that was not going to happen. That was never going to happen. Neal Brown, which is crazy because, like I said, I was out of the country for a week, so I had no contact with anybody. I couldn't even get a hold of you, so
right.
I could not get any information. So when I got back late Sunday / early Monday morning, I started texting people trying to find out some information, and all I heard was he's still the head coach, and everything's going to move on as usual. There's nothing concrete that I found out. There's nothing out there that has, or nobody has any information out there. I'll tell you this right now. Nobody knows what Shane Lyons is thinking. Nobody knows what President Gee is thinking. Nobody. So when you see a report out there right now that they're going to move on from Neal Brown or that he's safe or anything like that, I wouldn't read too much into it because there's no concrete information that the two so-called I kind of call them like my right-hand people or sources or whatever you want to call them. The two people that I trust most, they have no idea. They have no idea about what this situation is going to look like in a month, a week from now, 3 days from now. Nobody knows. So let's not read into all the misinformation because there's a lot of things out there that I think are just maybe people want to be first, they want to be first that say that they got it. I don't know. I'm still trying to gain information. Other people are still trying to gain information, but I can tell you right now, as of Wednesday night, nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen.
I know this. Listen, I'm going to tell you something. West Virginia has never, to my knowledge, in the last 25 to 30 years, fired a coach in season. Now,
and at this point, they're 3-6. There's 3 games left. If you're going to fire a coach with 3 games left, like what is the point of doing so? Now you might get a little bit of a head start in the coaching search, but let's be honest. If there's already conversations about that, Shane Lyons probably has a notepad of people that he's probably already got lined up thinking, okay, if we do move on, here's a list of guys that we can look at. That list is probably already put together. So
I'm sure
not like you have to do that after the fact.
There is no, and I keep reading this. It's beautiful to hear this nonsense about a credible source. I've never heard of a credible source coming out of a West Virginia meeting that's going to be linked or leaked to any media source.
That ain't happening. that's not happening. And all of these reports about it was supposed to happen in 24 to 48 hours. That was on Sunday night. Like that was never the case.
No,
and
I'm glad you're clearing this up.
Yeah, and you guys will be the first to know. I promise you, if I ever hear anything, you're going to see it first on Twitter, then on our site. If you don't see anything from us, it's probably not happening. It's probably not true. We're not going to put out fake stuff. We're not going to do some hypothetical thinking. No, that's not going to happen. But Gene, before we kind of close this thing out, I do want to give a little attention to what Neal actually said during his press conference on Tuesday about all this stuff happening, the rumors. all the kind of the hatred that he and his family have been taking. So let's take a listen into what Neal Brown had to say on Tuesday about this whole situation.
Like I try to limit. I try to, you know, nah, you can't block it. You just have real conversations. Like that's a real conversation you have. Dax is he's sheltered from it, but my daughters have to deal with it. My wife has to deal with it. For me, and that's where it really is bothersome when you're talking about my family or really the families of the staffs that are involved, and to a certain extent too, not to a certain full extent, is the players' families too. And what I try to relay to my daughters and my wife, and I talk to our players about this a good bit, is these they're not attacking you personally, even though they may at you and your name is, and it's your Twitter account and all that kind of stuff, or your Instagram or whatever else they have these days. But like, it's not personal. Like, and if you allow that to be personal, that's on you. All right. Or that's on me, because most people, and I would say almost all people that are doing that type of activity on social media, they don't know you. All right. They don't know me. And so it would be foolish of me to take that personal. It would be foolish of our players to take that personal. What it is they're not pleased with the product, and that's fair. Okay, that's fair. And so that's kind of how, like, I talk to my kids about it and our team about it. And it's something you got to deal with. And if you're going to be in the public eye, and that's something you have to deal with. You got to deal with the highs, and you got to deal with the lows as well.
All right, so there it was. We got about 2 minutes left. So, Gene, I want to give you the floor for about a minute, and just kind of talk about what you, I guess, would do in this situation as a coach, as a father, as a husband that's going through this situation, because it's tough. Like he said, he's kind of able to shelter it from his son a little bit. He's too young. His daughter's his wife. They see it. They're on social media all the time. And obviously the players are always on social media. How
Absolutely.
do you take that? And what, like, as he said, you don't want to take it personal because it's not personal.
It's not personal.
What would be your message to your family and to your team?
Let me say this real quick. First off, to Coach Brown and his family, I don't like it. I don't like it. I'm not that guy. You know what I mean? That man is a man. He's a husband. He's a father. His job is to first take care of his family and take care of his wife and his kids, right? So for all those fans with all this nonsense and the hatred towards this man and his family, it's ridiculous. At the end of the day, this is football. Let's be clear. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on in this world let's keep it in its right perspective. If I'm Coach Brown, the first thing I would do is sit down with my family and let them understand that this is the business that I chose. And this is the business that I've chose. So you're going to have to put the blinders on, so to speak, because you can't take what's being said personally. They don't know us personally. They only know me as my occupation as a coach. They don't even really know me as a husband or a father. They just know me as a coach. So try not to take this personally. If I weather the storm and we're still here, we're going to do the best job we can, because that's what I'm cut from. If I'm fired or released at the end of the season, then we'll thank God and we'll thank everybody for the opportunity and then move on to the next stop. But that's what I would tell my family. I think his wife already knows that. When you marry a coach, you pretty much know what comes with it.
Yeah, Gene, I totally agree with you. I think you just got to set it all to the side and just worry about 1 week at a time. That's what Neal Brown's focus is. Like, as he said in the press conference, you don't want to bring that negative energy back into the building. Leave it outside and kind of wall up. That's the best way to really do it, is just to block out all the noise and focus on 1 week at a time. Whatever happens at the end of the season is going to happen anyways. So we'll see what happens. But like I said, when you go out and you're searching all this stuff about Neal Brown, be sure you know where you're getting this information from, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And as I said earlier, I don't know anything in terms of this whole Neal Brown situation as of right now. I'm still learning some stuff, trying to get as much information as I can. There's not really anything going on, or else I would have heard about it by now. And a lot of other people would have too, that and probably follow on Twitter. So
Just
blame
because
you.
you're first, just because people are first doesn't mean they're correct.
Yeah.
That misinformation stuff is played out. Just because you rushed and you're first doesn't mean that it's correct information. So I'm hoping that the fans don't continue to read into this stuff. Everybody has their personal opinion. You can have your personal opinion, but I'm more concerned with the negativity that comes with somebody's personal opinion. I'm not attacking this man as a human being. When we're talking about stuff, we're just laying out facts, records, wins, and losses. This man's a good man.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
State that again. He's a good man. You understand what I'm saying? So please don't misconstrue laying out football facts and stats as if that is, some type of attack on this man's character. That's a good man. And I mean that. He's a really good man. And I wish this was not the case because I really do believe that culturally, for what we needed, for someone to come in and represent this university in the state and the players the way that he has done that, I'm 100% locked in on that. We're just specifically talking about wins and losses. It's not
And Gene,
personal.
actually, I want to ask you one more thing before we go. When it comes to the money, though, at some point there's got to be like a point, like I said, where you kind of like draw the line, and that's kind of it.
Right.
How do you balance that as an AD or as a president? Obviously, you've never sat in those shoes before, but like how would you balance that when you've got millions of dollars that you would have to pay that person to not even coach at your school anymore? Like, because if he does come back for a fifth year
Mm-hmm.
and say they start 1-4 next year, which could be possible. They played Penn State first game of the year.
Right.
So what if they start off 1-4 next year and you're still gonna have to pay Neal a lot of money? Is there a point in time where you say it's time to bite the bullet and we pay him whatever the buyout is and move on and try and find something more sustainable and more, I guess, successful? Or do you
Right.
just kind of ride this thing out and you honor the man's contract? Like, I mean, because at some point you feel like there's got to be a point where you just draw that line. I just don't know where that would be.
Well, and that's the reason why nobody knows what's happening behind closed doors, because at this level, this is the cost of doing business. At this
Yeah.
level, this is the cost of doing, and this is why you oftentimes when this happens, why do you think ADs get fired along with the coach?
Yeah.
Because usually, if the AD is the one who brought this particular coach in, who negotiated that particular contract, and if it's
And
not
it didn't
feasible,
work.
working, then a lot of people look at, if you're reading the room correctly, but then you were the one who extended this particular coach, you were the one who brought him in, so you should go with him. Exit stage left.
9 and
So
13 since he gave him that contract extension.
right. So it really does become the cost of doing business. Now, at what point does that happen? I think it has to happen when you reevaluate a coach with this kind of money. You already know when you signed him to this kind of money, if it don't work, what you're looking at. That's why I'm saying it's the cost of doing business. That's not a surprise if the coach doesn't win and you know what you already extended him, what the buyout's going to be.
Right.
You know why?
Right.
Because that's the first thing you negotiate.
Exactly.
So you know in your head what that's going to be when you extended the guy. Just like when you first hired the guy, you know what the buyout's going to be. Well, hey, I'm the agent for so and so. If this doesn't work, okay, now here's the buyout. Now, if you agree to that as the AD, then you know what that buyout is. So it's no surprise that we're here with these numbers. The only thing that a good AD is going to do at this point is minimize the amount of money that you're going to have to pay out.
Yeah.
And at what year does that come? Now, if you tell me we're going to bring him back for a fifth year because the buyout will be less, that's a business decision. And you kind of hope and pray you can ride that out and you don't start off 1-4.
Yeah.
Because if that happens, then you might be, as my mother would say back in the day, you might be on the soup line with him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that go behind the scenes, like I said, and especially just with the contract. Like, there's a lot of language in there that a lot of people probably wouldn't really understand. And I mean, there's just so many loopholes, I guess, that I wouldn't even say loopholes. Like there's just so
No.
much
You
that
said it right. No, you said it. You know why? I think, well, I know you know this, maybe the fans don't. When I retired from playing, I was a sports agent for 10 years. So I
yeah.
negotiated contracts in the millions for a lot of professional athletes and a lot of entertainers. So yeah, that's exactly what they are. Because it was my job to put those loopholes in.
Exactly. So
So
he said that's my job to put them in. I
you're
love it.
speaking the right lingo.
Yeah, and like there's just so much that could happen. Again, there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to try to act like they know what's going on, and they don't.
Right.
They simply don't. And that's not me trying to belittle anybody else or trying to say that they don't know what they're talking about and you should only come to us for the information. I'm just telling you, which is probably the exact same stuff that the other West Virginia media that I know and trust and respect, they know pretty much exactly what we know, and that's really not a whole hell of a lot right now. So
Right.
just kind of sit back, relax, and we'll see what the last 3 games hold.
Can we say
Because
this, Schuyler, before we jump off this thing? And I'm sorry.
yeah,
Let's pray for this man. Let's pray for this man's family. Let's pray that we are making the right decisions in everything that we do as it relates to this man. How about that?
yeah,
How about that?
absolutely.
We want the best for our program. I believe that sooner or later we will get exactly what we need, one way or the other. But let's not harp on somebody's downfall, man. That's not good energy. I just had to put that out there. That's not good energy.
Yeah, 1000%. And actually, I keep saying one last thing, but there's just so much that we're running through right now, and I want to get everything in here. So, although I won't talk hypotheticals in terms of his job status,
Mhm.
what would your feeling be if this team does not win another game and they finish the season 9-3? Where would you be sitting with Neal Brown?
Again, just purely on wins and losses, X's and O's, I would not be happy with a 3-9 finish, especially when I got on this thing and said we're going to go 10-2.
10-2.
Don't be laughing. Let's be clear. So look, but at the same time, I would have to look at all the other teams around the country, and especially in our league, that had a quantum leap up in their staff and the decisions that was made for their universities and how they turned it around. And then I would have to ask the question, why aren't we trending upwards the same way that they are? Because that's all you can do. When you're in a conference, you're looking at what everybody else is doing, right?
Yeah.
That would be the question. And again, it wouldn't be so much what are we not doing as to why we're not meeting those expectations. Is it recruiting? Is it development when we do bring these young student athletes in? Is it we're not getting the right kind of players in the transfer portal? Those are the things in my meetings as an AD that I'm going to have with my head coach and his entire staff. Honestly, I want to have the entire staff in my office right after the season, from defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, all position coaches. We are all sitting down with a cup of coffee, with a notepad, and I want to go through every single detail of how we're running this program from the top to the bottom. Honestly, that's what I would do.
And
I want real answers.
And I think the biggest thing with Neal Brown is the way he is so structured from an organizational standpoint, like, and how to run a program, like in terms of saying the right things to the media and installing a family type culture. Like, he is everything that you would want in a head coach in terms of those things, right? I mean, it's clear as day. The only thing that is really lacking is the results, because he's recruited well. I mean, let's be honest, he's recruited well ever since really he's been here. Better than Dana Holgerson, better than Bill Stewart, rest in peace. But like, I just think the way that he goes about his business, how detailed he is, his background. You know, he comes from a family of 2 teachers. Like He knows how to run a program. And I think that might be one thing that Shane Lyons looks at and says, you know what, hey, I might be willing to ride it out a little bit longer to see if this works, because if it does, and he
Right.
finally turns the corner, we may have something cooking here. Now, it's maybe
have
hard to
long-
see
you
right
have
now.
long-term
be-
success if it works.
Exactly. It's hard to see that now. It's hard to see that ever coming to fruition because of what we've seen on the field so far. But hey, Bob Huggins this past season, like he admitted to it. He said, "Hey, we just didn't recruit the transfer portal the right way. It was a foreign thing to him, and he learned from it. This year, they've got a bunch of new transfers that they're working in. It seems to be, again, it's only one game into their season, but looks like they have some pieces. Now, will Neal Brown get that opportunity to learn? I don't know, but we'll see. So
NIL.
that NIL, that's another thing.
You got to bring someone on staff that understands the marketing ability and how to get the NIL really kicking to get your marquee players there. Because unfortunately, whether you like it or not,
keep them,
whether you like it or not, that's a major component in getting in the right players through the transfer portal and coming in out of high school.
Because let's be honest, Gene, whether it's Neal Brown, Nick Saban, or me coaching that team, it does not matter unless you have some sort of support system to where you're going to keep guys here and be able to pay them, because that's what college athletics is right now. It's a big business, and these kids are getting paid money. If they have an opportunity to go to an SEC school or maybe even another Big 12 school and make $100,000 or so, why would they come to West Virginia if they can't get that? There has to be some sort of setup to where they're getting the money, because if not, to me, I don't really think it's going to matter. You're not going to have the talent.
No, listen, I agree with you. Deion Sanders. There's so many different levels to what he's doing at Jackson State. You can't replicate that because you can't replicate Deion Sanders.
Right.
What you can do is look at the blueprint of how he's laying it out and say, you don't have that dynamic of a coach with that type of pedigree, but there is a blueprint if you're paying attention to what he's doing. Right. There is a blueprint.
Yes, there is. So we'll see what happens. West Virginia taking on Oklahoma this Saturday at 12 o'clock, FS1. Mountaineers have to win. Their backs are against the wall. They need to win all three of their remaining games to get to bowl eligibility. And we'll see what happens. Me and Gene will be back here tomorrow to preview West Virginia, Oklahoma on the Walkthrough Game Day show. And then we'll be back here on Saturday, early evening to do the Mountaineers Now post-game show. And don't forget also, we're doing the Mountaineers Now post-game show for basketball too. Chris is doing that show with me. West Virginia Pitt, the backyard brawl on Friday at 7 o'clock. We'll have that episode out for you, hopefully within an hour or two after the game. So we'll see you guys tomorrow for the Walkthrough Game Day show. I'm Schuyler Callihan for Eugene, Napoleon. This has been the Between the Ears show. Take care.